The only real God is the one that you believe in. Start looking for the God in others. And if you find you're tuning into a wave, well then I don't know much about the end saved.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, friends.
Welcome into another episode of Spiritual Philosophy Chatter with the Joneses. I'm Danny Jones.
And I am Samantha Jones.
And here we are, episode 69.
69.
And what is the topic?
This is the Philadelphia experiment.
Ooh, I love this one.
Yeah, this is something I knew nothing about until I met you.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, it is a conspiracy theory, but to me, there is more proof than that other conspiracies don't have. Do you know what I mean? There's more proof here.
There's a theory within this experiment, but it's not a conspiracy theory because it's fact that it happened.
It depends on who you ask.
It's been documented.
Yeah. If you ask the Navy, they still deny it, though. So,
baloney.
So it is what it is. So they do consider it a conspiracy theory. Right. I didn't write the book. They did.
Yeah.
So anyways, yes.
Okay.
That is our topic.
That is episode 69.
69.
Well, before we jump into it, how about anything from last week?
Yes, last week we did the Great Awakening, and I had a lot of people that messaged me on this and were just like, this is great. This is exactly what I was feeling. You hit the nail on the head. There was one person that messaged that asked, why would we choose to be here on Earth at this time with all of this going on? And I guess we didn't cover that really in the episode, so we maybe talk about that briefly, but we chose to come back at this time to help so that we could be light workers because that's our job. Somebody had to come and do it.
And there's souls that chose to come back in this time that aren't light workers just purely for the reason that this, not from a mortal standpoint of view, I think, more from the other side standpoint, is it's a very exciting time.
Yes.
Because there's so much change all at once.
Yes. So even if you don't put yourself into this category, this light worker category, and you're asking yourself, why are you here at this time? Like you said, it's probably, it is because you wanted to be here, because you want to learn and you want to experience these things. There is a lot more to come too, so there's a lot of growth and learning with this Great Awakening. You don't have to be a light worker to see that, or be going through the awakening even yourself to see that.
Right.
So, but yeah, I know that that's probably a hard one for some people to understand. Why would you want to pick a time that's just so harsh and cruel and, but I think too, when you reincarnate, the way that it works out too, you're usually going through something pretty significant anyways.
It sounds kind of like chasing your tail.
Yes.
But you will answer your own question when you go to the other side. You will tell yourself why you wanted to come back.
Exactly.
Nobody really is going to be able to tell you that.
Right.
But there is a reason.
There is. And some people they haven't found it yet, and they will. And so they're still, trapped in that space of, well, whatever, I don't really believe that. Right. But you might get there.
Yeah.
Yep. So
that's a good one, though. I like that.
Yeah, I like that question, too.
Who shared that?
That was Amy.
Amy. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Amy. Yeah, that was a good question. So, but that's all I have from last week.
All right. Well, how about episode 69?
Let's do it.
The Philadelphia experiment.
Yeah. We have watched a lot, listened to a lot, and done a lot of research on this, and it is a wormhole because it goes farther than I think a lot of people think it does. I think a lot of people think that knows about this maybe thinks that it ends with, the ship reappearing and people, whatever, going on with their lives, but there's way more to this story. So very excited to kind of get into
And something else that you share was a couple other people that weren't American citizens that witnessed it, that shared this.
Yes, and we will definitely get into that. So yeah, there is proof of this. Yeah. Go into it with an open mind if you don't know about it, because this is definitely something that, if you would have brought this to me 5 years ago, I probably would have been like, no, that's silly. But once you start to open your mind and see that anything's possible, and our government doesn't want us to know a lot of it because it would frighten us, or, some things they may just want to forget even exist.
And some of it is knowledge we don't know a lot about.
Yeah.
And we make mistakes and people die and strange things happen.
We don't want to admit to it.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. So let me tell you, first of all, a little bit about what the Philadelphia experiment is if you're not familiar.
All right.
The Philadelphia experiment is an alleged military experiment carried out by the U.S. Navy at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. It started sometime around October 28th, 1943. And I think we have so many different dates, so we're just going to say 1943 because that is an inconsistency. The Navy destroyer that this took place on was named the USS Eldridge, and it was claimed to have been able to be rendered invisible by not just radar, but physically as well, that it would be able to disappear to enemy devices. This was during World War II. I think it was a couple years into World War II.
It's the peak of World War II.
Yeah. So this was a way that they thought, well, we could, take on our enemies without them seeing us coming.
Well, they were afraid of German subs.
Yes.
They were afraid of the Japanese coming to bomb the West Coast, which, if you look at history, like one of the largest gun mounts was mounted near the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge to protect us. Yeah. They never mounted that gun because the war ended, but they were interested in this because they weren't sure if the subs were going to be coming.
Right.
And those are obviously a lot harder to detect.
Yep.
So
at that time, radar was a new technology too. Mm-hmm. And so that was one of the reasons I think they kept this a little bit more hush-hush.
Right.
Was because it was like, well, this isn't even a known technology.
Right.
Then, let's see. The U.S. Navy maintains its claim that no such experiment was ever conducted and that the alleged claims don't even conform to known physical laws. Well, of course not. But see, here's the thing: I love this. Somebody can get on TV, not saying that that's what happened, but somebody can get on TV and say, "This never happened. It doesn't even make sense," and people are like, "Okay."
Right. If you were the military in 1943 and you wanted to do something like this at the height of a world war, to ensure that a madman like Hitler does not take over your country, along with a lot of other countries he was starting to conquer, you're pretty much going to open your mind to any possibility that could save us.
Yeah.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
If you were going to hire somebody that was just the most intelligent mind in the world at this period, I mean, who would the people you would think of to try to figure out how to do something like this?
Right, exactly. Well, and we are really naive to think that they would tell us these things. Right. Really. Like, they have classified information for a reason. Mm-hmm. So this is probably a classified file that will never come out.
Right.
Doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Well, they did hire somebody.
Yeah.
For this.
Yeah.
And that was Tesla.
Right. They did hire Tesla, yeah.
This is his invention, his theory, based a lot on Einstein's theories, too.
Yes, that's actually what I was going to say next, actually. It was the experiment was based on unified field theory, and that was a term coined by Albert Einstein. This term was used to describe an interrelated nature of forces that, like electromagnetic and gravity, it's like when they're combined and become one instead of two.
Yes.
Is how they described it.
Using frequencies.
Yes.
They were able to adjust the frequency of the ship and its contents to the frequency of this other. They kind of essentially created a false time zone.
Right. Exactly. The testing began in the summer of 1943. The test showed the USS Aldrich was rendered nearly invisible, with some witnesses witnessing. The generators aboard this ship were designed to power a new kind of magnetic field, like we had just talked about, that would make the warship invisible to enemy radar in broad daylight and in plain sight of nearby ships. This is exactly what happened. The USS Aldrich vanished into thin air. 4 hours later, it appeared in Norfolk, naval shipyard in Virginia and then reappeared back in Philadelphia.
Right.
It's pretty wild.
Yes, so that's the actual initial test, which is August 13th, 1943.
Yeah.
There was a test the day before, August 12th. Mm-hmm. Okay, they've done it and they don't have guys on the ship. And it works, except the only problem is there's one problem: you can see an outline, according to Ed.
Yes.
You can see an outline of the ship that almost looks like a black hole. Mm-hmm. But so it's not totally invisible. You can't see the ship at all, but you can just see an outline around it. And then through it's just sort of like a little bit of water, but it's more like black hole-ish.
Yeah.
So that's when they said, we got to fix this. They go back to the drawing board for hours and decide to do it again on the final test on the 13th.
Right. And people that witnessed this on the 13th did say that they saw a bluish hue outline around the boat as it was leaving, like a fog almost.
Yeah.
And then when the boat returned and the sailors got off, a lot of them complained of nausea. Some of them even, they said, it was a quote in one of these articles that said that some of these people went bananas, is what they said. One of the craziest things was that some sailors were embedded in the metal structure of the ship. So pieces of them were embedded.
Yes. So Ed said like 35 sailors all together on the ship. Mm-hmm. About 12 on deck.
Yeah.
And then the rest below.
Right.
He said 5 of the 12 on deck were like embedded or molded one into the metal.
Yeah.
5 guys jumped overboard. Mm-hmm. There was a couple other, he said some guys were walking around phasing in and out of visibility.
Yeah.
Like they were going into a different dimension and then coming back, and all kind of not crazily walking around, but looking very
disoriented,
nervous. Like he was with his brother in the control room at this time. He said you could see the arcing within 30 seconds of turning it on. It looked like a lot of tubes. I don't know if anybody knows what old television tubes or amplifier tubes look like, but they're like glass and kind of like light bulbs.
Yeah.
The room was full of tubes, and these things started kind of arcing and sparking what they thought was like electrical sparks. Mm-hmm. Almost immediately, about 30 seconds into switching it on, he said about 2 minutes later, they go up to the deck to witness what you just described.
Right.
Is guys walking around, phasing in and out. Some melted into the ground. Yeah. The metal, excuse me.
There was one guy that I read about that when it started, he was on deck and he was like transported down below, but he was molded into a piece of steel. So that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Let's see. So we've talked about that this is considered a conspiracy theory. It says that skeptics dismiss it and conspiracy theories continue to... They call the government out on it, and the government wants nothing to do with it, and they won't talk about it. So how do we prove it? We don't. It just kind of goes down as one of those things.
That seems to be the way of, kind of governmental policies and classified things, is that they just don't respond or just say, yeah, whatever. But you have people in Virginia, right? Or where it reappeared for 4 hours.
Yeah.
So on the 12th, when it disappeared for, I think, 20 minutes.
Yeah, something like that.
On the 13th, on the final one, it disappeared for 4 hours.
Yeah, 4
But
hours.
you have witnesses that see it reappear in Virginia.
Yeah.
And then you have witnesses, like there's a gentleman on a cargo ship or something going by.
Yeah.
Going by that harbor.
Yeah.
That worked for like a Brazilian cargo something like that.
Yeah.
Witnessed it. He didn't say this until years later, probably in fear for his life.
Right.
But he admits to it.
Yeah, I think this is the same one. Are you talking about the one I told you about earlier?
Yeah, where he says, I see it vanish.
So his name is Morris Jessup, and he was a writer, and he wrote about UFOs. And he received over 50 letters in the mid-1950s from somebody calling himself Carlos Allende. Carlos claimed that he was aboard a merchant ship bound for Algeria and witnessed the disappearance and reappearance of the ship.
That's incredible testimony.
Yes.
And then, but then there's other testimony of people in Virginia that saw it appear there.
Yeah, I don't have that, but yeah, there were other witnesses. But the thing is that you're taking, like, I don't know, let's say that 10 people at most saw it happen. Maybe, I don't know, maybe more than that. All the Navy's they have to do is
Right.
No.
That's all.
No.
But there's other soldiers. Sailors, excuse me. That I want to say Ed or Al. Let's just call him Al.
Call him Al
to make it simple.
That's his name.
Al mentions, I think later in one of his interviews, that there are other sailors that came forward, but at this point there wasn't a lot of them still alive.
Right.
And Al's giving these interviews about 2000.
Yeah, he didn't live much longer than that either.
No, a lot of them were exposed to such high levels of radiation because of the magnets, the coils they were using.
Yeah.
And the systems they were using. It was incredible. And they're essentially trying to go into hyperspace.
Right.
Well, when you're in a hyperspace, you're exposed to all kinds of radiation. In 1943...
Yeah.
There's no kind of protection. The only really protection they had, and Al explains this, is today they make ships out of aluminum. Then they made them out of steel.
Yeah.
And steel will protect you from a lot more radiation than aluminum could.
Yeah.
So.
Going back to what we were talking about Morris Jessup and the letters that he got. So he kind of dismissed this guy as, a liar or whatever, because Carlos could not produce any physical evidence that he actually saw this happen. So the guy just kind of wrote it off, right? Well, then in 1957, 2 naval officers from the Navy's research department contacted Jessup, claiming to have received a strange package containing a copy of one of his UFO books covered in handwritten notes claiming advanced knowledge of physics that linked extraterrestrial knowledge to breakthroughs in unified field theory. Jessup instantly recognized the handwriting as that of Carlos Allende. Yeah. So Carlos went in and he wrote everything that he knew, what he saw, and he sent it to the Navy. And, again, they're just...
Well, something I'd like to point out about this, the project and the experiment by itself. All the sailors that were picked for this project were not the sailors that normally occupied those ships.
Right.
These guys were handpicked, just like Al and Duncan. They were, I think he said they were PhDs. So he couldn't understand why they wanted to bring PhDs into this experiment.
Well, and something that I found really interesting, and one of the things that we listened to, is that he wasn't originally set to go there. He was set to go to Pearl Harbor, to Hawaii.
Yes.
And then they said in there that they knew that Pearl Harbor was coming, or they had a feeling it was going to be attacked, and they didn't want him and his brother there, and so they sent them to Philly instead.
They were using radar, but they weren't sure it was a reliable enough source to say we're absolutely sure they're coming.
Right.
But I think they were pretty sure that it worked.
Yeah.
And that they were coming. They didn't want to panic everybody.
Yeah.
Something else to keep in mind is that Van Neumann, Tesla was head of the operation as far as design and that whole thing. You had Van Neumann, if I'm saying it correctly, who was second in line. And then you had Captain Harrison. I believe Captain Harrison was the captain of that ship before they brought this in, but his role was simply to operate the ship and do what they told him to do and not stick his nose in what was going on.
Right.
Van Neumann was a prisoner of war, essentially.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. He was...
Oh, yeah.
He was a submarine commander, captain, who they commandeered their submarine, and he was taken, and as in a deal, not basically put into prison, he was used in our military, similar to the NASA scientists that we got from Germany. Okay, both of these guys have admitted to knowing about other technologies not from this world that were back engineered to be able to do certain things.
Right.
That's very interesting that they put this man second under Tesla.
Right.
Tesla, when they did the very first test, there was actually 3 tests.
Mm-hmm.
The first one, they put no men on the ship. It went fine. They immediately wanted to go. They did it with. I'll take that back. There was 3. There was no men on the ship. They did it all connected to wires on the dock.
Mm-hmm.
Then they said, we need to learn how to do this with everything installed on the ship.
Yeah.
That went successful. We want to build these ships, and then we want to put men on them. And Tesla was like, hold on a second. We have one successful test with cables, not with it built onto the ship.
Yeah.
And you want to jump from filling the ship up now, and he quit.
Yeah.
This is a very interesting story when you look at the way Tesla's life went.
Yeah.
In the end. We'll talk about that at a different time.
Yeah, we're going to do a whole episode on Tesla.
So he quits. That puts Van Neumann up. He now is changing things in the design of Tesla. But again, he has knowledge, and he was handpicked. He's a guy that was trying to kill us in submarines for the German army. And now we have hired him.
Yeah. So he doesn't care.
That's interesting.
Isn't it, though?
When you think about it.
Yeah. I think it takes people that don't really care about human life to have to.
Well, of course, I mean.
That's why Tesla went, no, because he cared.
Well, I think that America might have been embarrassed to admit that.
Yeah.
And so, no, it never happened.
Right. I think time travel and all of this was a little bit ahead of the time for that. They didn't have the technology. They shouldn't have messed with it.
Right.
You know, they probably have messed with it a lot more than we know. There's a lot more. If this is really accurate information, because we're going to talk about Al more, if the information that he's giving is really, truly accurate, we don't know even the slightest bit. Time travel is absolutely possible. Right. And I could see it. Why wouldn't it be? Why would all these other things, be possible, but not time travel?
Well, that's the part we haven't really even gotten into this yet.
Right, exactly.
Is Al and Duncan's story about this.
Right. So there is a movie. We've talked about it briefly. We did watch the movie. It is mostly science fiction. But the basis is, it shows what we've talked about really up until this point. It shows the brothers going overboard. They're not brothers. They're just friends in the movie. Right. And then it becomes kind of a love story and kind of a sci-fi
Hollywood
thing.
Always is to kind of creep in to what they think to keep your attention.
So if you've seen the movie and that's what you know about the Philadelphia experiment, just know that is not the true story from what we hear from Al. This is, there's a lot more to it. That's a Hollywood hype.
Yeah.
So
they had maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. It was, and so I wrote, the movie was loosely based on Carlos Allende's narratives as he continued trying to talk to anyone that would listen. So that's where the movie came from.
The guy that was on the merchant ship, or the writer.
The guy that went to the writer.
Oh, okay.
That guy. Yeah, that's
the movie's based on his. Wow.
Yeah. But then we bring in Al Bielek. Okay, who? So his the name he was born with was Edward Cameron, which is why Danny had called him Ed a couple times. So we're just going to call him Al. He was born in 1927. He was a very smart man. People that knew him when he was young said he was like a walking encyclopedia. He could have adult conversations at a very, very young age. He knew what was going on.
And even these interviews that he's giving at his age, in the year 2000,
very together. Mm-hmm.
I've seen multiple of them, and he's right on with each one. Like, he doesn't tell them different.
No.
He's not all senile and...
There's consistency.
Oh, absolutely.
Which tells you that he's not bullshitting us because there's consistency. Yeah. Let's see. So he joined the Navy because he wanted to help fight the Nazis, right? So why don't you talk a little bit about what you know about him? Because I think you know more about him. That's pretty much the basis of what I got. But he was one of the men on the ship, like you had mentioned.
Yeah, him and his brother were both assigned to this job. It's interesting that they kept two brothers together.
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe they had the same interest, same line of work. And
yeah, that's cool.
My understanding was they were PhDs. or they were studying to be PhDs in the military.
Yeah, they were pretty young for that.
But he said he couldn't understand why they wanted their role in this project.
Right.
So needless to say, they do it. That's their job.
Yeah.
So, like you said, they thought they were going to Pearl Harbor, and all of a sudden, they're not.
Right.
They're going back.
Right.
They end up there. They're told what they're going to do. They did have a lot of, I think, a lot of clearance in what they were being shared, as opposed to a lot of the other sailors that were going to be involved in this test.
Probably, yeah.
But like I said, they were all handpicked. They were not the normal sailors that occupied this particular ship.
Right.
They were brought in. And the reason for that is so the military could keep track of each one of these guys.
Yeah.
To know a lot about them.
Yeah.
Just about maybe their health prior to, afterwards.
After, yeah.
They could track them, families, things like that.
Yeah, they didn't use the same two guys, if I understand correctly. Like the one ship, the first round where they tried with people, they didn't use those same ones on the next one.
Yes, the only two that were used twice was
these two,
Al and Duncan, and Van Neumann and all these guys.
Yeah, the rest of them were not.
So, anyways, Al and Duncan are on the ship, and they switch it on, and things are starting to spark and arc, and they're not sure. Now there's radio communication to witnessing ships. Okay, they're at some island. They're near some island right off the harbor, I think, is where they kind of were doing this. So they lost radio contact and couldn't. Well, were we supposed to turn it on, or are we supposed to turn it off?
Yeah.
We're supposed to turn it off now or leave it on.
Yeah.
And so that's when they decided to go up on the deck to see what was happening. That's when they saw people infused into metal, people coming in and out of visual, phasing in and out of visual. He said what it appeared to them standing on the ship was like a real heavy fog, about 2 or 3 feet out from the bow or the edge of
like a
the side of
greenish
ship,
fog,
just like a fog, a gray fog.
Yeah.
But it didn't really appear like anything was crazy was happening.
Yeah.
In the movie, it's much more different. They
way
they
more
make
dramatic.
you feel like you're in some sort of vortex or black hole looking thing. Yeah. But that wasn't the case. So they panic, and they jump overboard.
I would have done the same thing.
Al and Duncan,
Yep.
and I think he said 5 other sailors did the same.
Yeah.
They fall through this fog. He says it feels like they're falling for a while. I don't know how long a while is. He just says, feels like we're falling for a while.
This is where the movie, pretty much the realistic part of the movie ends.
Yes. Now this is all based on Al's
This is based
claim.
on, yes.
So they jump off and they land. They eventually kind of, it's not like they hit the ground. He said that the fog just kind of clears and they're in a hospital. And it's 2137. And him and his brother Duncan are in adjacent beds for 6 weeks. They're in main beds for about 4 weeks, and then the hospital in general for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
He spends a lot of time watching television, seeing what's going on. He never went outside, but he could ask a lot of people that worked there a lot of questions, and like I said, television. He said from looking at things, not much looked hugely different.
Yeah.
As far as the technology, television was hanging from the ceiling, like on a swivelable post.
Yeah.
They had a remote control. What was more interesting was the information that he was watching. He said, I didn't see things like more entertainment type of shows or soap operas. It seemed like most things were educational.
Yes.
But the land had changed as a result of global warming and other probably natural disasters or earth changes. There was no money system.
I don't think that happens till later.
Are you sure?
Yeah, that one comes in later.
Oh,
I'm
that's
pretty
when he
sure.
okay. So there's definitely geological changes.
Yeah.
Not sure if that is when they're talking about when he's talking about Third World War.
Yes, this is when he mentions that the Third World War, he learns about it, that
Right.
it has happened. And at this time in 2137, he says that the population on the planet is only 300 million.
Yeah.
And what is it right now? Like 7 point something billion?
Yeah.
And this is 117 years from now. So
from 2137, Al, spends time in the hospital. He's watching shows. He is then, and I don't exactly remember how this happens, but he transports then from 2137 without his brother Duncan to 2749, the year 2749. He spends, I think, 4 years. 2 years.
49 to 51.
2 years. Okay.
Yeah.
So he spends 2 years there, not in a hospital. He's like working, and he actually meets other sailors that jumped overboard
Yeah.
in the future,
Kinda
which is
wild.
that's crazy right there.
Yeah,
I was
especially like that time, because this isn't Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure where you're picking where you're
Right.
going. These sailors are just being transported to wherever. So
Yeah.
why?
one of them was like a tour guide
2749?
that he met and became really good friends with, and was a sailor that jumped over.
Yeah.
He talks a lot about the cities in the world at that time in 2749. We go from a population now of about 6 billion people, 6 to 7 billion people, and there's no more than 500 million.
You can't get
people.
above that. Yeah.
They don't go above 500 million people. There are floating cities about 2 miles high in the city. They've learned, so you still have ground city on the ground, but
Yeah.
there's also floating cities they've mastered and learned
Yeah, anti-gravity.
anti-gravity. There is no cash or credit type of system. It's more based on everything is provided for you, but you're expected to contribute to your sort of general community where you live.
Yeah.
You can choose to live out in the boonies, but then you're on your own as far as survival, and things are not readily available for free.
Yeah.
You have to kind of go get them, hunt them the old way.
Take care of yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Or you can do it this way. There is no government per se. Government and banks have all been sort of reduced down to a lot smaller roles in the society and how they function. There is, I guess, sort of like a one world law.
Yeah, it seemed like that.
It's more of a one world law,
yeah.
but the cities sort of maintain their own. And that was kind of the impression I got from that.
Yeah. They also, he said that at that time, everything's completely run on computers. Everything, including if you break the law.
Yeah.
The computers determine your fate. So, yeah, it's completely artificial intelligence.
But they're organic based.
Yes.
Talks about crystals. It's organic based artificial intelligence.
And he said there's very little abuse of the system. It's not like what would happen if we try to do that now. And that kind of makes me sad. Like, I wish, I mean, I'm sure I'll live during this time period, but I was hoping to see that kind of happen sooner, where we didn't rely so much on money that, because there's plenty of things to go around, plenty of food, plenty of everything. I love this idea of not having to deal with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I was hoping to see it sooner.
Yeah. And just when he was talking about some of the geography
Yeah.
in this time, he says that Florida doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Most of New York is underwater, I believe.
The United States is just
Yeah, he says that the Great
trash
Lakes
at
turned
that
into
point.
one Great Lake. The Mississippi becomes much broader,
yeah.
a waterway, and a good chunk of like San Andreas Fault near that part of California, and little bits of Washington and some of Oregon. But the Gulf of Mexico, like Corpus Christi, all that. And he says this looks more like, he goes, I don't see an upheaval of land,
Right.
It's more, I get the impression it's more from the global warming, from water rising.
Right. What you're talking about is actually not at this time. It's at 2137 that he saw all that. By that time, we have all of that land change. At this point, everything for the most part is vertical. So there isn't really a United States. There's no United States. It's very different. He couldn't even really describe it because the cities are not horizontal now. They're vertical, like you said, 2 miles into the air.
Right, but there was still ground.
Yes, but this was
minimal.
Yeah, but this
okay.
stuff is way done. Yeah, that's way done. Let's see, what else did he say about then? You had mentioned that a job wasn't demanded of you, that you could just do whatever you wanted, but they wanted you to give back. They wanted you to contribute to society, and you were expected to.
Yeah.
You know? Let's see, what else? I think you hit pretty much everything else on the list here that I had. In one of the things that we listened to, they talked about what happens between 2137 and 2749, and he honestly just says, I don't know. You know, I didn't really look into it. We didn't really talk about it. And he's very honest about, I remember this, I don't remember that, you know, because your memory is never going to remember 100% of this stuff.
Right.
And his, I don't know if you knew this, but his memory was actually triggered by watching the movie when it came out. I wrote that somewhere.
Oh, I could imagine.
Let's see. Where did I write that?
Yeah, because he did say some things memories have come back to him.
Right.
In the process. Well, it's still not over because he now goes back to 2137.
Yes.
To the hospital to get his brother. He somehow shared that you've got to get back.
Yeah.
And they've created I can't remember what he said exactly, but it was like, you've created this virtual time lapse thing, and until it's complete, it won't go back in place, kind of thing. So you and your brother have to be there.
Yeah, you have to go back
when it's closed. So he goes from 2749 to meet his brother back in the hospital in 2137. Then they go to 1983. Yeah. So they're going 40 years ahead of the Philadelphia experiment. Where they now see an older Van Neumann. And he explains to them why it's important they're both there. They have to both be there. They got to shut this thing down. This time they give them radiation suits because the reason they were in the hospital to begin with in 2137 is because of the massive radiation they were exposed to in hyperspace. Yeah. So, give them the radiation suits. They do this. They're back on the Eldridge. He kind of gets into it a little bit because he said, you know, weren't they kind of freaking out on you? Like, you come back, you didn't have this suit on when you were here.
Yeah, you would think.
You know, because I think they only vanished for 20 minutes, according to them. No, this one's 4 hours.
Yeah, this one's 4 hours.
So you weren't here 4 hours ago with that suit on. Now you have the suit on.
And he was gone for like years.
Yeah, so he's like, I took the helmet off, and I think that didn't draw as much of attention until later when they saw the actual suit. Yeah. But anyways, they make it safely back on there. I think he said that he could see Duncan doing this phasing in and out thing too.
They still, I think at that point, the sailors were phasing in and out still.
So they power it off. And right as they power it off, before the vortex closes, Duncan jumps back. Yeah. Back off overboard. Yeah. In the movie, they're portraying Duncan as falling in love with some woman in the future. Yeah. And when he leaves to go back to close the vortex, the hole or whatever, the portal, he's so bummed out.
Yeah. They've only known each other for like 5 hours, have you?
Yeah. And she's, they're just going through hell together. Anyways, they fall in love. And so this is why in the movie they say Duncan jumps back over. Yeah. But it also would explain why there was only one radiation suit found on the ship. Yeah. When they both were sent back in radiation suits. Yeah. There was only one left. Yeah. He stayed in this, I wrote this down in some of the notes too, Montauk is where he was stationed after Philadelphia experiment.
There's a whole Montauk one of these too, I think.
Yes.
I don't know anything about it. But.
So he's stationed there for about 2 years. No, wait, 44. Yeah, he left in 44. So he was stationed there for about a year. Mm. He asked because he was being held like basically in quarantine.
Yeah. And
away from anybody that he could talk to.
Yeah.
But he spoke to Van Newman. He said, "Is there any way that I can at least marry my girlfriend?" I think back then that was important. If you were never going to see somebody again, possibly, you're making an honest woman out of me.
Yeah,
sure
totally.
She's making an honest man out of me.
Yeah.
Let's get married. We'll never see each other again.
Exactly. Makes sense.
So he requested this, and because Van Newman was head of the experiment, he was able to pull some strings and make this possible. Mm-hmm. So he gets married. I don't know if she stayed with them, but they stayed on this base for about a year. In the movie, they'll show this is where Al and Duncan land on this base. Right. They end up there and through time travel.
Yeah.
This is the base that they're referring to as Montauk. He stays there for a year. They leave and go to Los Alamos military installation. I don't know exactly the states that these were in off the top of my head, just saying the names he was giving. So that's where, for the first time since 1943, they put this suit out on a table and asked him where this suit came from, this radiation suit. Mm-hmm. He said ultimately he wasn't even interrogated after the whole experiment. I think maybe they thought they were all just like maybe not even themselves anymore, so they didn't know whether to share or talk. Mm. But he said I was kind of just left in quarantine for like that year until they brought me to Los Alamos, and that's the first time I saw that suit since I was on the Eldridge.
Yeah.
And so he had to explain to them where he got the suit, where he'd been. And they kind of, Van Newman just sort of chuckled it off. I think maybe it's like, you've been stuck in the hyperspace a little too long.
Yeah, right?
But, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Like, it's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
And they, again, asked him, well, where's the second suit?
Right.
Maybe they're figuring Duncan, because he said Duncan jumped off with me. So maybe they thought he just didn't land where you landed.
Right.
But he said he was with me.
Yeah.
For a good portion
over,
of it, so.
He did mention, Al mentioned that they definitely tried to repress his memories in the Navy.
Oh,
and that, what else? He used a specific word. He claimed that he was a part of the crew and that the Navy brainwashed them. That the Navy brainwashed them all is what I wrote. And that makes a lot of sense because, they have to get rid of it somehow. They're not going to use a little black flashy thing like in Men in Black 2,
right.
Or
no.
All the Men in Blacks. But yeah, they're not going to do that. So they have to find a way to like brainwash you. And so he said that he kind of forgot. He forgot about all of it. And then when he went to see this movie in 1984, he started having, it started triggering memories.
Wow.
And from there is when he started talking about it. And he was very outspoken. He did there were a couple of documentaries. Let me see. I wrote them down if anybody wants to watch them. Project Montauk and the Time Travel Chronicles is one of them. And then Surviving Montauk and the Philadelphia Experiment. Those are two movies that Al Bielek was in about his experiences. Because I don't know about the Montauk, Project Montauk, but I believe that has something to do with aliens. We'll have to look into that more. Mm-hmm. But he was involved with that as well. So,
well, he said that they definitely, with some of these guys that they were especially getting from World War II, that, and I've seen different documentaries about that.
Right.
We talk about Hitler and I can never remember that gentleman's name, the scientist for NASA.
Right.
They were working on something that was called the Bell in Germany that was like a UFO.
Yeah.
They were learning how to create this thing. They had it tied by chains to these like a sort of octagon-shaped columns of concrete.
Yeah.
So it would keep it from flying completely away, but it could let them hover a little bit to learn how to operate it.
Yeah.
Those columns are still there. Yeah. The bells, nobody knows where that's at, but there's diagrams, drawings, from history. Mm-hmm. So he even shared that this was technology that came from elsewhere.
Right.
That they were sort of reverse engineering, trying to figure out. And I believe Van Neumann knew the same thing.
Yeah.
Tesla, I think Tesla's just one of those guys. I don't really think it took him to look at something that had come from a different world.
No.
And reverse engineer it. I think Tesla could sort of meditate himself into a place where he could see it all. He could see, they would, essentially the energy, whether it's the other side or the universe, he's tapping into directly to the information.
That is the same thing I believe Albert Einstein did.
Yes.
There's a lot of movies, we should even, or not movies, but like home videos. We should even maybe do an Albert Einstein, maybe even combine them into one episode. But there's videos of Albert Einstein sitting there doing mathematical equations or whatever he was doing, and you can see it in his eyes that he's connected to something else, and he's just going and going. And I'll tell you, when you're connected to that source, like I can sit and write and just write and write and write, and they'll keep filling me as long as I'm listening and doing what I'm supposed to do. And that you can see Einstein doing that. And I truly believe that Tesla could as well. He just kind of channeled it in a different way.
Yeah.
We watched something on Einstein too that said that his brain was different when they autopsied his brain. It was different. Very smart man. Yeah.
Well, something that's interesting and this could, fit into a Tesla episode, but because he's the man the government went to say, if anybody can help us do this, it's this guy.
Right.
I mean, he figured out how to make free energy.
Yeah.
Why couldn't he figure this out?
Right.
And so, but the end of Tesla's life, they destroyed all of his documents.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was because they didn't want him going somewhere else with this information about what they were doing.
Yeah.
Or it went so horribly wrong.
Yeah.
They just never wanted it to be reproduced ever again.
Right.
Maybe they were angry that he walked out on them.
Right.
Because he said, I don't want to expose 30 lives to something right off the bat.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure he was threatened after that too. I mean, his life went completely downhill, and from what I understand, he died poor and miserable and alone. So, you get the government and the military involved in your life, and you don't do what they're
It'd be
asking
real
you
easy to paint somebody in that in that kind of vein, that picture.
Absolutely, yeah.
And to just destroy them.
Yeah.
And then you look at guys like Edison, who were all about the money and the power, and the lives didn't matter to him as much. So, it's just, I admire Tesla for not doing that. I admire for him for walking away and saying, "Hey man, I'm not comfortable with this."
Right. He didn't say it like that though. He sabotaged it.
He did. He made it not work.
Yeah, and that was smart though, because if he would have just said, "I'm not doing this anymore," the government probably would have messed with him.
No, you made a very
more.
good point. He didn't verbally say it to them. He sabotaged it. And then
Van
Neumann came in and figured out what was sabotaged.
Right.
So that's probably how they knew it was sabotaged.
Yeah.
And gave the government a right to go, how dare you sabotage us?
Yeah.
But rightfully so. I mean, he was trying to make sure that innocent people, and uninformed people.
Right.
Because none of these sailors were told.
No.
They were just told to stand out there on the deck and watch, and they will be asked and interviewed later as to what they saw.
Yeah, I think they believed that this invisibility that they were talking about was strictly radar. They didn't lead on to the fact that the whole thing was supposed to disappear. That was the plan.
Yeah.
The military, this wasn't a story where the military went, "Oh, the ship disappeared." No, that's what they wanted for it to happen, And no, they didn't tell these guys that.
No.
And that's,
but they were exposed to so much, you got the radiation of hyperspace, but then they're using massive coils with magnets.
Right.
That kind of stuff going on there too. I mean, I don't know if that thing causes radiation, but I was like, whoa.
Right. My feeling on it too with Tesla is that he didn't feel like we needed to be messing around with this type of technology. And that was another reason why he was just like, "I'm out," because once you start to see what can happen, it sounds great at the time.
Yeah.
But then you start to think about it and it's like, wow, maybe we're not ready for this yet.
I think if they would have said, hey, you know what? You're right. Let's not put one man on this ship until we know it works absolutely perfect. Because not only were they planning to do this with just one ship, they wanted to be able to do this with a fleet of ships and also submarines.
Yeah.
So they wanted to be able to roll into any place virtually unseen and attack people.
Right. So I have to believe, because of this story, because I do believe this story, that time travel is real.
Oh, yeah.
And if time travel is real in 1943, who knows what's going on.
The whole theory of Tesla's design was based on Einstein's theory.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So, and Einstein's theory about this is that it is possible.
It is possible. Yeah.
And he showed us it's possible. He just wanted to do it his way safely.
Yeah. Right.
Unfortunately, it didn't go that way.
Nope.
I'm astounded that, some things as a skeptical mind first, with Al gets brought up like, Al, how come you didn't get cancer?
Right.
Like a lot of these guys, who knows?
Yeah.
Some people do, some people don't.
Right.
I can't explain genetics. Maybe him jumping in to that vortex and getting out of there.
Right.
Or jumping overboard and then into this wormhole.
Right.
Maybe that helped get him out of there. He might have still been exposed to some, but maybe not as much.
Well, something that you're maybe not thinking about, too, is that he did go to 2137, where he was in the hospital.
Yes.
So they could have done some stuff on him that healed him for any, damage that might show up in the future.
You do bring up a good point because he said not much really visibly looked a lot different in 2137. He said, but the medicine was extremely different, and the doctors even sort of joked that, we have abandoned the 20th century type of medicine that you're probably used to.
Right, exactly. So that could have been what happened. Everybody's body's different. And seeing the videos and pictures of him, he looked like he took care of himself, and he was very in shape, according to what I read. He went into the Navy,
Right.
So there's a lot of reasons why he lived as long as he did, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it didn't happen to him, you know.
No, I believe him.
Yeah.
I totally believe
see
him. And
it.
it's
Yeah.
like the more that we kind of, these things are happening in our world and we're realizing how the government doesn't want us to know things until they think we should know things.
Right.
Right. So it wouldn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me. It intrigues me.
Yes.
But not so much the experiment. I think that part's rather sad. It's amazing that we can do this. And I think that it just goes to show if we open our minds, we could do just about anything.
I believe it. Mm-hmm.
But his story in particular is so fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
And again, it's hard not to believe because I've seen more than one interview, and he's on it.
Yeah.
He just remembers it.
All kinds of interviews with him on YouTube. Al Bielek is his name.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in learning more, that would be a good place to look. He's very, very articulate, and his memory is pretty good.
Yeah, he's easy to hear.
Yeah.
I mean, the quality of the recordings aren't super great. They're, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but you can totally understand him, and he's easy to follow, and he's very informational about the whole thing. It's just like, wow.
Something happens to me when I listen to BS. I start to get nervous. I feel different things. It's like a human lie detector a little bit.
That's your instinct, yeah.
Right. The longer that I listen to somebody talk, the worse it gets. With Al, I didn't feel that. No. If he was making this up, I would have felt that. I have no doubt. Right. Can't get past that lie detector.
It's genuine.
After all the stuff I've listened to. Yeah. Like 3 hours worth of stuff,
Right. No, it's truly genuine.
I believe it.
He really is.
Yep.
Well, that was cool.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm glad we did that one.
Yeah, that was a lot of research, but I have fun doing it with you. We learned a lot.
Yeah. We need to do one about Tesla.
Yes.
Because that's just a part, of how genius this guy is, and I'm sort of proud of him that. Yeah, it sucks he kind of went out the way he went out, but I'm proud of him that he didn't take that way.
Right.
Yeah. He was trying to do good for humanity.
He was. And I think his connection, whether he realized that it was to the universe or whatever, it made him feel something deeper, and it made him like that. He just couldn't do that. He was a good guy. Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing the research on that for sure, because I don't really know anything about him.
Yeah, I mean, the next time somebody like him, or if he's reincarnated into another life or whatever it is, the next time a genius like that comes around, we should listen to him.
I think so. Yeah.
They could help us a lot.
Yeah.
So
gotta listen to
cool.
science.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome blossom. Well, before we say goodbye, did you want to share your page real fast?
Yeah, let's do that. My website is SamanthaJonesPsychicMedium.com. You can find everything about us or about me, how to set up an appointment, all the good stuff on that website.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And for me, djonesartcollection.com for the web, at djonesartcollection for Facebook and Instagram, and gypsybrown.com for the music, at Gypsy Brown Music for Instagram, and at Gypsy Brown Band for Facebook. That's it for me.
Yay.
Well, we hope you guys got something out of this. I'm super into stories like this that just are too hard to walk away from and say that's a bunch of baloney. But
for sure.
We hope you got something out of it.
Yep.
I loved it.
I did too.
And we hope you have a great week. Until next week. Send love.